Every year, millions of defective vehicles are sold to the public without any knowledge that the car could catch fire in a rear-end collision, or that the airbag could send shards of metal flying into your chest. This may seem like another outrageous news headline, but statistics backing that claim were put forward by the government agency whose job it is to keep these dangerous cars off the road. That agency, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, has been tracking all of this, and according to their data, about 1 in 10 cars on the road today were sold with a defect. Surprised? Yeah, so was I when I found out that on average over 30 million cars have been recalled every year for the past decade due to defects from the factory. Now, I'm guessing that most people watching this video have not looked into how many cars on the road today have active recalls, and unfortunately for those of you who are already shocked, things get worse still. Go onto any car website you can think of, cars.com, Kelley Blue Book, you name it, that's not a real site but you know what I mean. The list of current recalls is dozens of pages long, and every year hundreds more are added. 2023 alone saw over 1,000 separate recalls added, and that makes me wonder the obvious question: how the f are car companies able to sell so many broken cars? Okay, I was an engineering student too, and I know how much the phrase "C's get degrees" was thrown around, but come on, these are products that are in some cases costing people their lives. How is it that we are allowing cars to be sold with critical design flaws? 2 weeks ago, I set out to learn everything I could about car recalls, and this video is a summary of everything I found, one such thing being a cost-benefit analysis that Ford did on the costs of fixing a known design flaw versus just paying damages to the people who got burned by that specific car. Yeah, that really happened, and I printed it out so I can hold it up in front of you. Hello people of the internet, I'm Nico, and I drove a VW Jetta that had a recall for a fire hazard for several months before it was fixed. In this video, I want to talk about how the recall system works, the problems that the recall system currently has, and to also show some footage of the Ford Pinto blowing up for basically no reason at all. Let's get the ball rolling with the simple stuff. How does a recall even work? The first step is actually just to report the problem. Every complaint is put into a public database that the National Traffic Highway Safety Administration looks through, and with enough complaints, the NHTSA will open an investigation. So, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but we need more Karens in this world. They will make sure that these investigations happen and our cars get fixed. Now, these investigations comprise of 4 steps. First, a screening, where the NHTSA reviews the filed complaints to determine if an investigation is necessary. Should an investigation be necessary, then the NHTSA will conduct an analysis of any petitions calling for an investigation. Should the petitions be denied, then the reasoning will be published in the Federal Register. Finally, the investigation is conducted and only closed when the NHTSA notifies the manufacturer of recall recommendations, or if they don't identify a safety-related defect. If the NHTSA does find a safety-related defect and notifies the manufacturer, then the final step is simply to monitor the progress of the recall, communicating with owners on how to proceed on their part with the recall. Now, this can take many forms depending on the severity of the recall. With my 2017 VW Jetta and the risk of spontaneous combustion, there surprisingly was no do not drive order issued that I could find. So if you're wondering what the threshold for danger is before a car is deemed unsafe to drive, I don't know either, but apparently spontaneous combustion isn't dangerous enough. I did some digging to find the recall that affected my 2017 Volkswagen Jetta, and here you can see what a recall notice looks like. It details everything from what cars are affected, what the problem is, detailed instructions of how to fix the problem, precautions owners should take, how sale of these vehicles should or should not proceed, and everything in between. Clearly, a very detailed investigation has to happen, and this is where things start to go south in the recall process. As is the case with almost everything mankind has ever done. Progress is stunted by inefficiencies, and the NHTSA is no different. With a staff of only about 600 people, just 50 of which are in the Office of Defects Investigation, the NHTSA has, for good reason, come under scrutiny by the Inspector General. Now, I don't recommend reading through the full reports because, after all, these are government reports. There are few things in the world more boring, with the possible exception of Romeo and Juliet, but there are a few highlighted things that I wanted to talk about that the Inspector General noted. Firstly, the ODI lacks the procedures needed to collect complete and accurate vehicle safety data. Okay, that's not good. Collecting vehicle safety data is kind of important when it's your main job, so why are they not collecting the right data? Oh, there are no guidelines on what specific information automakers and consumers should report, resulting in inconsistent data which ends up being useless. Okay, well, you people maybe focus more on doing your job instead of using your insider knowledge to buy stocks before they go through the roof. Thanks, every American citizen. Anyway, other problems included not following standard statistical practices when analyzing what little usable data they have, and also not thoroughly screening consumer complaints, which is not what the NHTSA says publicly about reading every single complaint they get, but when you receive 75,000 complaints in a single year and you have 50 employees, some of which who are busy with the actual investigations, it is admittedly a little bit difficult to get through all of those complaints sent in by all of the Karens in America. Now, understaffing and data collection malpractice are already some very big problems for an agency that needs both a lot of people and a lot of information to effectively force car makers to fix their defective cars, but therein lies another problem for the NHTSA, which is that they have no legal authority. In other words, the NHTSA can only recommend that a car maker fixes their car, and also how to go about it, but if the car maker decides, nah, we don't wanna, then there's little the NHTSA can do about it. And even more unfortunately, while car makers recall their vehicles on their own most of the time, likely due to liability concerns, it's also not uncommon for car makers to simply ignore the recommendations. Take, for example, this little incident about Ford that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. One such thing being a cost-benefit analysis that Ford did on the costs of fixing a known design flaw versus just paying damages to the people who got burned by that specific car. I said it right here. So let's talk about it. Ford in the 1970s had a very different lineup of cars from today. The Mustang was garbage, there were basically no SUVs offered, and one of the offerings in place of those SUVs was the Ford Pinto, a rather boring wedge of cheap materials, but this car had one ability few other cars possessed: its ability to detonate in a rear-end collision. You see, designing cars with cost and size restraints leads to some major engineering headaches, and in the case of the Ford Pinto, that had to do with the placement of the gas tank. The Pinto had a vaguely similar silhouette to the Ford Mustang of the time with a short rear overhang, but with cost constraints there were not many places to fit a gas tank with enough of a buffer to protect it from various crash situations. Now, this was a problem Ford was well aware of, as is made known by this internal document, where Ford concluded that it was cheaper to just pay the damages in injury and death to consumers rather than just paying to fix the cars. Here's the PDF of the document you just saw me holding. According to Ford's math, the benefits of fixing the cars added up to $49.5 million, which pales in comparison to the $137 million it would have cost to fix all of the cars. Now, I can understand not wanting to spend $137 million on something that doesn't see any direct financial benefit, but we're talking about human lives endangered and in the worst cases lost. Unfortunately, big public companies are run by the shareholders, who in the past have exercised their power in court to get bigger payouts rather than using that money within the business, and therefore companies are forced to prioritize short-term gains. Interestingly, that court case I'm referencing also involved Ford, which makes this a weird full circle moment, but anywho, that's how business works in America. Companies do what their shareholders want because they don't want to get sued. It happened with Ford and Dodge. I made a video on it, you can watch it somewhere up here, and there are examples of this happening nowadays. Around 2014, General Motors was fined $35 million for failing to notify the NHTSA about a defect in several of their models in the early 2000s that led to the deaths of 124 people and injured a further 274. Like the fire hazard with the Ford Pinto, this was a known fault internally at GM for years, but nothing was done until the NHTSA got involved. Around the same time, Chrysler was ordered to recall 2.7 million Jeeps for a potential fire hazard in the event of a rear-end collision. Sound familiar? Well, the difference is that Chrysler launched a voluntary campaign where the customers could bring their cars to the local dealership, have it inspected by the mechanics, and provided with extra structural components to protect the gas tank. That actually sounds pretty good, certainly better than what Ford did, and I'm sure it's nothing to worry about, but you know, we want to be thorough here at Nicomotor, so let's just have a little gander at what this structural component looked like, and oh, it's a tow hitch. That's interesting. Now, I don't want you to get the wrong idea about the companies or the people working for them. The people making these admittedly questionable decisions are most likely just looking out for themselves. The higher-ups don't want to be ousted by the board members and shareholders, and the employees underneath them don't want to lose their jobs for failing to meet some requirements. It's because of this that we have agencies like the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to kind of keep everyone in line and have some guidelines in place. But because of the immense workload dumped on the very clearly short-staffed NHTSA, it's very difficult for them to do their job and make sure that car companies are not selling defective and dangerous cars to us, the consumers. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more videos like this where I explain how the automotive industry affects our lives and vice versa, then hit that subscribe button. It's free and it helps me out more than you might think. If you really enjoyed this video and would like to make these videos possible in the future, I do have a Patreon page that I have linked down in the description where for like $3 a month you can watch these videos ad-free and also some behind-the-scenes content whenever I do get around to making that. Thank you again so much for watching. Until next time, people of the internet, peace out.